Hey everybody, today's topic is the holy relationship. The holy relationship is basically the Holy Spirit's answer to the special relationship. And it corrects both the special love relationship and the special hate relationship. It's really important to note up front that the holy relationship isn't holy because suddenly it's in a state of eternal bliss. That's not what the holy relationship is. The holy relationship is not when two people, and both are course students, for example, they meet and they fall in love and they study the course together and they believe they are in a holy relationship. This is not what this is. The experience of a holy relationship might be very unstable, might appear anything but holy for a long time. And what makes the relationship holy is really only the purpose. The purpose is what makes the relationship holy or unholy. And it's either the purpose of the ego or the purpose of the Holy Spirit and Jesus. In and of itself, the relationship is neither holy nor unholy. So you can't really tell if somebody has a holy relationship. There's no way of telling on the outside, because most of the time people don't know on the inside if they have one. And as a default, I always think it's better to say and realize that we don't have a holy relationship. We have a special relationship that once in a while gets, we have those moments of clarity, but most relationships here in this world are special relationships. Now, the correction for the special love relationship is the very same thing as for the special hate relationship. Both are healed basically through forgiveness. And the section, the healed relationship, which is on page 362, that's chapter 17, section 5, the healed relationship, describes this process of healing the relationship in great detail. Every special love relationship is at its core a special hate relationship. It just has this added feature that we feel like we're in bliss because we for some time get what we want from the other person. And if the other person has the same needs and we meet that need, then the other person also thinks that there's this blissful time. But that's just an additional layer of defense on top of the special hate relationship. The special hate relationship is every relationship that we have with the ego. And then the special love relationship is just an added layer to that. So in this segment, we're not going to concentrate on the special love and special hate relationship so much because we have spoken about that before. We're going to talk about the process of healing. And for that, I would thinking about first clarifying the term healed, because Jesus mentions the healed relationship as the header for this section. Healed in the course means that the purpose has been changed. For example, when the body is used for the purposes of the ego, for the purposes of attack, it gets sick. When the body is being used for the purposes of the Holy Spirit, it heals. But the healing doesn't mean that there are no symptoms. It's very important. Ultimately, there is no healing for the body because the body eventually deteriorates and dies. So the body is never really healed. It is the mind that is being healed through the process of forgiveness. And the process of forgiveness is very basically to change the purpose of the relationship from the unholy purpose to the holy purpose. And basically the whole chapter, the Healed Relationship, chapter 5, talks about that shift from the unholy relationship to the holy relationship. And it describes that process in great detail. It's a great chapter. I've always loved that chapter because it felt very comforting when I was going through very dramatic times in my life in relationships, and that always helped me get some clarity and get some perspective on what was happening. So basically, the ego's purpose, the ego's goal in everything we do, in everything we say, in everything we think, in everything we feel, is destruction. Our own destruction and destruction of everybody else. And the Course says in chapter 12, section 7, it says, "For your destruction is the one end toward which it works, the ego, and the only goal and the only end with which it will be satisfied." So destruction is the only goal of the ego. If the destruction of the ego or the destruction of the sonship is the only goal of the ego, then the sonship's restoration is the only goal of the Holy Spirit. So let's take an example. For the lack of a better example, let's take a train. We're on a train, and that train leads into the desert. And the train represents our relationship. And the desert represents our destruction, the goal of the ego when we're on that train. We realize at some point that the train is actually going to the desert, and we no longer fully want that goal, right? We came far enough to realize that the ego's goal is not satisfying anymore. So we ask the conductor, the Holy Spirit or Jesus, for help. And the Holy Spirit changes the upcoming switch on our tracks. And the train moves onto a different track. This track now leads eventually into a lush green landscape, very mild climate. But the new tracks run parallel to the old tracks for a while, because with trains you can't make a 90-degree turn, you have to do a gradual curve, right? So the train is running parallel to the old tracks for a while, so we don't really feel any different as of yet. But because the destination of the train has been changed from the desert to a more milder climate, all the stuff that was on the train that should help us in the desert are no longer necessary. Huge air conditioning units, for example. The windows were darkened so that the sun doesn't come in, big water tanks everywhere. So those old things that are no longer needed are completely in the way. And in order for us to prepare the train for its new destination, we have to work on it. We have to remove all those things that are still there for the old goal, the desert, but no longer needed. There might be a time where we longingly still look at the old tracks and think, oh, it would be great to have my old goal back, the desert. Even though it wasn't totally comfortable, I knew what it was, and it gave me what I needed, even though it wasn't for a long time, and those periods of times got shorter and shorter with each relationship. We still kind of hang on to those relationships, and we're tempted to jump tracks, to go on the old track, jump on a train there, and go back to the desert as we had originally planned. Now, the Holy Spirit didn't change the train, right? The Holy Spirit only changed the goal of the train. Nothing changed. It's the same, very same train, just on different tracks. And Jesus says in this section, I have said repeatedly that the Holy Spirit would not deprive you of your special relationship, but would transform them. So it's important to note that when we're in a special relationship and we ask the Holy Spirit for help, He does not take them away, right? He wants to transform them. He wants to use them as a classroom so that we can work on the relationship and adjust it to the new goal that we have now set with Him. When we do those modifications, we take away those big air conditioning units, and we take away that foil that was on the windows to not let the sun in. The train rumbles and squeaks, and it's a very, very uncomfortable ride for a while, because it's still made to go to the desert, and we're completely rearranging everything on the train to adjust to the new goal, and that's a very uncomfortable ride. So I don't know how good this analogy is, but the relationship that we now have asked the Holy Spirit for help with is going to get bumpy. It's going to get bumpier than it was before we asked the Holy Spirit for help, because of that new goal. We have a new goal now. The moment we ask the Holy Spirit for help and realize the old goal just doesn't do it anymore. I'm not ready for the new goal yet, but I can't live like this anymore. There's too much anger and all this dynamic going on in the relationship, and we're not fulfilled, and there must be a better way. And the Holy Spirit immediately switches the train tracks, but our whole direction is still, interior direction is still going towards the desert. And we're on a different tracks now. So we have to adjust the relationship to move into the direction of the new goal. And that's very, very hard to do. At least we experience it very, very hard. So this section, the healed relationship is so clear that I don't feel any need to do any kind of commentary on it. It's just so crystal clear what happens in the relationship. So I'm not gonna go into it. What I wanted to go into a little bit further is to connect it to forgiveness. So forgiveness in the special hate relationship works as follows. So the first step is for us to realize what we're doing, right? For example, somebody, as we said before, somebody cuts into a parking spot, we get angry and upset, and we first recognize what's happening very clearly. The second step is to realize that we want the other person to be the bad guy so that we can be innocent. And the third step is to ask Jesus and the Holy Spirit for help to look at us and the other person in a different way. And then we wait and we judge not. That is the process of forgiveness. And we can apply it to everything in our lives, including the special love relationship. So the special love relationship, it works exactly the same way, except for this additional layer. So that's a little bit tricky because we don't really realize necessarily that something is wrong when we're in love. We usually start realizing that something's wrong when we fall out of love, right? While we're in this blissful state, it is very hard. And that's kind of a sign for the genius thought system that the ego has made. It's brilliant in a way for us to feel that love and affection for somebody and not knowing what's going on underneath it, right? So to look through all that, I think we must have already either done the course or done some kind of a system that allows us to realize what's going on in special love relationships. And usually it's the case that the pain we go through a couple of times with different people, then at some point we realize something is different or something has to change, and we ask the Holy Spirit for help, and we go into the relationship in a different way. We're still in love. It still might not work out, but we're kind of a little bit more awake, a little bit more aware of what's happening in the relationship. And it is that which is the first step in forgiveness, to realize something is not right. We're so focused on that one person. The love we feel usually doesn't include everybody. It is very specific for this one person. And the slightest thing that the other person doesn't say something or comes late or something happens and we're afraid that this is going to end or something's going to happen to the relationship, and etc. We all know how that works. So that's the first step, to realize what's going on. If we can become aware that we're making ourselves small in the relationship, we give a lot of power to the other person to decide how we feel. If we feel great, that's good, but if we don't, and we give the other person that power to make us feel bad, then that's like a red flag that comes up for us to realize, whoa, there's something that's not right. And that's the moment where we step back and look at what's going on and become as clear as possible at that moment what we're doing, right? That's the first step. The second step is to realize that we want that feeling of it's not working out, or it's really working out, that we think we're in this blissful state. And the second step is to realize that we want that, because we want that defense against the love of God, where all of our brothers are with us in our mind, not just this one person, right? So the second step is that we want to be in the situation we're in. We want to experience exactly what we're experiencing as a defense against the love that's underlying it. And the third step is to ask the Holy Spirit for help and Jesus for help. And the chapter, the section 5, the healed relationship, basically begins when we invite the Holy Spirit into the relationship. There's no longer just the two, there's now this third entity. And that third entity, as I described before, is the one that switches the train tracks immediately. The moment we invite him in, the goal is switched to healing. The purpose of the relationship is now holiness. And the relationship is still deeply set in unholiness, so there must be turmoil. And one of the big things that comes out of this chapter is in paragraph 6, for example, it says, "This is the time for faith. You let this goal be set for you. That was an act of faith. Do not abandon faith now that the rewards of faith are being introduced." So Jesus asks us for patience with the other person, patience with ourselves, and patience with the relationship because it has been saved. The moment we invite the Holy Spirit into the relationship, it has been saved. It might not look that way. We might still break up, right? But the goal of the relationship has been shifted, and that's all that counts. The goal of holiness is more important than what the form of what two people do in that relationship, what the outcome is. The outcome might be a breakup. The outcome might be a healing on the physical level where we connect each other again and are together for the rest of our lives, or it might be that we separate. But the holiness, the purpose of holiness, has nothing to do with the outcome of the relationship. Jesus urges us many, many times not to fall into the temptation to listen to the ego. That ego says another can be found. We can find another relationship, right? That doesn't mean he judges us if we can't make it. He's just very gently urges us and says, listen, let me explain to you what's happening and stay with me as long as you possibly can, right? He doesn't want us to feel bad if we can't make it. He would never do that, right? But he urges us very clearly. He says, hear not this now, the ego's words that say, try to find somebody else, right? So it's a very clear and powerful chapter that deals with that. So I don't want to really expand this more, because otherwise I would literally just have to read the whole chapter. It's really, really, really great chapter. I'm going to read one paragraph as a closing that I think gives us a little bit of a different outlook on the relationship and kind of shifts. This is paragraph 9 in this section, where it kind of shifts a little bit into, you know, when Jesus shifts into those beautiful words and beautiful sentences and phrases. There's this shift. It was a very clear description of the relationship, how it is when it changes. It's not an easy thing, and now he shifts into this really beautiful and poetic language. It says, "You are very new in the ways of salvation, and think you have lost your way. Your way is lost, but think not this is loss. In your newness, remember that you and your brother have started again together. And take his hand to walk together along a road far more familiar than you now believe. Is it not certain that you will remember a goal unchanged throughout eternity? For you have chosen but the goal of God, from which your true intent was never absent." Thanks for being here.